Kim's there. Okay, you're back. So as I was saying, this was the last article in the New Directions focusing on social justice. This was, I think, 2 issues ago. So at least how Leah and Melvin framed this, it was really that the previous 9 articles made the case for this, for whether or not evaluators should enact social change. And then this was more of the who, what, where, why, and when. And those were actually the titles of it that had a little bit more oomph to them. But I broke it down by those categories. So, right, we're looking at, whether or not evaluators should or can do or should do it. I think the article or the authors made a really good case here that, there are a lot of evaluation scholars that are really deep into the realm of critical theory, transformative evaluation, the very far end of the spectrum when it comes to collaboration, participatory evaluations, and they're committed to demanding more. And I should throw out their empowerment evaluation. Additionally, I noticed in this article that they really had, I want to say, 2 different tracks for evaluators. And I don't know if I'm just reading between the lines or seeing faces in the clouds. That could be either one. But so there's this first one of those evaluators that are in full bore and doing social justice-oriented action all the time, and they want to do better about it. Or then there's this other idea that there might be evaluators who aren't there yet. And I actually need to tell Leah this because I think it was presented in a really good way that, it's not that they weren't even ready to do it or that they should be doing it. Instead, they frame it, this is taken directly from it, this second main bullet, right? That not all evaluators are equipped to do the work of inciting change, and that is okay. And the reason that I feel like that they made this very explicit was because the sub-bullet under here, this authenticity in the work is critical. And I was just impressed by that because I don't know how often I see that, this acknowledgement that some evaluators, or I'd say even people, the quiet allies, there seems to be this pervasiveness in the literature that they are somehow failing in their duties, and maybe there are. I'm just saying I have not seen it presented this way before, and I thought it was interesting. The psychologist in me can come up with tons of reasons why some people can't be out there doing this work all the time. But I think Melvin and Leah did a good job calling this out. But they do say, and they present this phrase here, this oppositional consciousness, and why it's under the who question, then it comes in later. They argue that people with this oppositional consciousness, and I'll define it here in a second, are those that as evaluators can help foster that and bring that out in groups, or even use that to drive real social change throughout society. So the what question. The what they're talking about here is what is like the component that can actually cause this social change. And their answer is this idea of oppositional consciousness. And they define it as an empowering mental state that prepares members of an oppressed group to act to undermine, reform, or overthrow a system of human domination. And I don't know if I can come up with a better one than that. Instead, it's, I guess reading this, I just thought of it as a consciousness of a people that are tired of taking crap, and that they're ready to act, that they're ready to do something. The authors also throw out that this is defying the status quo by finding, this is that second line of it. As I talked about, there were like 2 parallel tracks in this. And here I think they're calling it out again, defying the status quo by finding a comfortable role to play in the overall social change. So why I noted this was because I really felt like it called back to that idea that some people and evaluators aren't always going to be the most vocal advocates, or I hope you understand what I'm saying, won't be taking the most aggressive stances towards social justice, at least in the way that perhaps the news stations love to see or something like that. But throwing out this idea that maybe you can defy the status quo just by finding some role to play that's comfortable to you. Additionally, Leah and Melv throw out these 4 critical elements of an oppositional consciousness, as an evaluator, using oppositional consciousness, identifying with members of a subordinate group, identifying the injustices done to that group, opposing those injustices, and seeing the group as having a shared interest in ending or diminishing those injustices. So once those 4 components come together, one could be said to have this idea of an oppositional consciousness, that you are aware of this. Do I have time? I feel like I have time. The only thing that makes me leery about oppositional consciousness, or at least the phrase, not even the idea, in psychology, oppositional is almost always a pejorative. You think of something like oppositional defiant disorder, where I could see a lot of psychologists seeing this as a negative implication here. So I would just wonder, in the literature, is this prevalent enough to break that? But that's just my own psychology background coming in, because maybe to deal with social change, it needs to be a little bit of a confrontational idea there. The where question?
This is Sarah, can I chime in real quick?
Yeah, please.
I wonder if that has a little to do with what I would say is a dominant culture preference for order and control.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the expense of justice.
Yeah.
And so, opposition, when it's in service of justice, I would say certainly could be framed as a positive. I see your point about not being able to get over that, that the idea of that, I can't think of the word, but the baggage that word carries, but I can see reframing it in service of justice.
That's a good point. Yeah, any time where a system needs to be broken down, you have to be a little oppositional. What comes to mind, there was the Glorious Revolution in England, where no blood was shed, but that was still really oppositional and people died. We just like to, anyway, I'm off on a tangent now, but yes, create social change. It seems like we actually need to hit up against some sort of barrier, because otherwise it would have already happened. And actually, I think that's what Leah and Mel saying here, that, if this was easy or straightforward, it would have already been done before. So coming up against these barriers is part of the program. The where question, for the where question, they really just throw out Michael Quentin Patton's 1997 work here, toward distinguishing empowerment evaluation and placing it in a larger context. I could imagine that to find more information on this, where would you look? The evaluation literature, there's some wider scope, but the authors were really interested in what NQP throws out here. And I'm not sure if he came up with these 3 topics that are on this slide: the critical change inquiry, critical analysis focused evaluation, and critical change evaluation. Even being in the field for a while, I had not heard of a couple of those said explicitly like this. But apparently in this 1997 work, he details these types of evaluation or inquiry that can hope to or be used for social good, social change explicitly. So critical change inquiry and critical analysis focused evaluation, they aim to make the inquiry a mechanism for bringing about social, cultural, economic, and political change. Eschewing any pretense of objectivity, they take an activist stance. Critical change inquiry aims to critique existing conditions and through that critique bring about change. I like it. I would love to read examples of that happening. And then critical change evaluation, inquiry into situations of social injustice interpretation of the findings as a critique of the existing situation, and then using the findings and critique to mobilize and inform change. I just think those are really cool. Once again, I would like to see them applied. I have actual. Okay, cool. The when question. You know, in here they talk about that there are these 3 integrated areas that, you know, that's when are we okay with moving forward or doing this work? The first one is just for ourselves, right? That we develop the consciousness to ourselves to become, I think I might have switched those words, to ourselves become motivated. It seems like a weird sentence, but I swear I copied and pasted that. Okay, so yeah, this when are we, our consciousness raised to the point where we become motivated enough to move forward on this? And then additionally, here we're talking about us, you know, can we move professional colleagues along the continuum to a place for which they feel safe and motivated to act as well? I feel like we're coming up against that trend again, that we see there's these 2 paths through here, because it is, right? They need to feel safe and motivated. And I can't help, I almost made it into discussion questions, but you know, I find it's very different for MQP to advocate, to do hardcore advocating for a critical theory approach to an evaluation than it is for like a evaluation fellow at a federal agency. I'm not saying that the fellow couldn't do it, or just some new and emerging evaluator that, you know, I could definitely understand why a new evaluator might not feel safe trying to buck systems of power in his or her place of work. So this idea that they feel safe and motivated, I appreciate it. And then identify the knowledge and skills needed to mobilize groups to seek social justice for themselves or their community. Of course, I feel like anywhere in the land of critical theory, you're going to run across this idea of ongoing self-assessment is critical, right? There is no there's no end, right? Once we become comfortable with one place, it's time for a little bit more reflection. There we go. And to try to continue to learn. Activism and its relationship to community action and self-determination are key elements of this oppositional consciousness. So the article makes a good point that, and I feel like a lot of evaluation literature does too, that, you know, it doesn't really do evaluators, I should say like a single evaluator to be an activist, right? There has been so many times that evaluation has been used against, in detriment of communities, that really when we're going to get good social change and fostering this oppositional consciousness is when that activism of an evaluator and the community come together. And maybe even not the evaluator. I'd be happy with just communities going out there and having this self-determination and oppositional consciousness to move it forward. So I just have the 2 discussion questions from actually the title, and I'll go through them here, but we don't actually need them on separate slides. But I just wanted to call them out, right? Is inciting social change something evaluators can do? And is it something they should do? You know, this article really does present the who, what, where, why, and when of it happening. But I'm still interested in whether or not people have different perspectives on this. You know, is it really something evaluators can do and should do? And then generally, I just like any sort of thoughts you had.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I think for me, it's double way for me. Yes, I like the idea of identifying with a community and helping to drive an advocacy or something. But I think that apart from culture, that personal or individual disposition is a good caveat to the whole thing. Yes, I don't see anything wrong with evaluators being part of social change. And you mentioned continuous self assessment. I think that is where the bulk of the work is, apart from culture, because individual disposition determines how an evaluator can, and again, disposition also from the professional point of view is what I'm trying to, bring out here, will also drive how aligned an evaluator can be with the community to even drive social change, you know. Um, yes, I think that individual disposition is a big part of it, but I personally don't see anything wrong in evaluators being part of social change.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point that, in the article, when they do talk about individual disposition, it, I, and maybe it's implicit in there and I'm missing it. So, but it's really about, them feeling safe and if they're ready to, and then there's moving along that continuum, right? So that if they're not ready, to help them prepare to get ready. But you're right, there is another facet of that, right? Do they have whatever skill, not even skills, like personality traits that would make them be good or comfortable in that realm? And I think often maybe we're just all hopeful that we could all be pushed there, we could get some good critical mass, and we could all be advocating for social change in the way we all see fit. But maybe people's disposition doesn't align with that. And I think you bring up a really good point there.
I mean, I think this is Sarah. I think there's a question of the self-reflection required to know when one is well prepared to do that. Because I wonder if, I only got through half the article, but based on their definition of, oppositional consciousness, does that mean as a white woman, I could only be working in that role on issues related to gender? Because that's one could make the argument that's the category where I'm oppressed. If I try to stumble in working in other areas where I am not among the oppressed, I can really mess things up.
Yeah, and I'm trying
I
to think
I think that in such situation, I think building relationship will be the primary thing. Um, I personally think that we can work with any group as long as there's relationship builds and there's trust, whereby the group feels like, okay, we have the same purpose going on. But just stumbling in and, wanting to be part of driving social change, I think will cast, somebody as a loner, and, won't get through that much because the community doesn't see me as one of them. And so there will be bias in the truth of my, advocacy or something. So I think building relationship is a big part of it and establishing trust.
And humility.
Yes, and will be primary to then taking the bulk of the work.
Kim, I saw you unmuted. Yeah.
Oops. I unmuted one thing and not the other. I think those are really good points. I also think this is a giant question. Yeah, on one level, it could be really simple. Like, is it something that we are able to do? Yes, but I think what Sarah's question and what is it Chinwe? I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering the
Chinwe.
pronunciation.
Correct.
Sorry, could you say it again?
It's Chinwe.
Chinwe. I think what the points that Sarah and Chinwe bring up are really good, which is under what conditions can we or should we? Which are, I think, a little more nuanced, but in my reading of the article, I think that's kind of what they're trying to pick apart. Yeah, I think I definitely think it's something we can do, but whether or not it's something we should do is probably dependent on a lot of different factors.
When we
and
are,
I do.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I like that. I'll just end by saying I like that the authors kind of leave that open and say that it's okay if not every evaluator like contributes to this, because if those factors aren't in play, if you're not able to be self-reflective, to be humble, to be very, very careful with doing it, you can mess things up. And I appreciate that they kind of leave that open.
Yeah, well, and oh, Sarah, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say, being really explicit about the stance that we are choosing, so that people don't expect us to be the sort of disinterested party and then see that we're not. So being explicit about when we're taking that stance. I think I haven't unpacked that completely, but I think we would need to be explicit about that, so as not to undermine ourselves and the whole field.
Yeah, yes, without, well, knee-jerk reaction, I think that's how you would maintain credibility, would be to be explicitly transparent about that. I don't know if bias is the right word, but that lens that you're approaching things with.
I mean, just real fast, I'll say, I remember being at AEA a million years ago, mid 2000s, when there was a lot of organizing around immigrant rights. And I remember here, because I was an advocate at that point, I was not an evaluator, but I was still at AEA. And I remember hearing the evaluators for working with one of the big national coalitions using the word "we," and including themselves with the advocates. And that was, it really struck me, because I heard that one or two times at that conference as I was attending the advocacy track of the TIGs, since I had just gotten in that role. And that it was just, it struck me at the time.
Well, gang, I think I kept you over by 1 minute. Sorry for being late again. New job and stuff, meetings, a lot of them, getting used to stuff. But I appreciate you joining me. I haven't picked the article for next month. I'm sure it'll be wonderful. At least I hope. That's a little too much confidence there probably, but either way, and it's the third Wednesday at 12 o'clock. We extended them to be till 12:30 because we kept going over. So I just thought we'd extend it. We went over again today, so that's okay too. But yeah, same bat time, same bat place next month. If you can join us, great. If not, hopefully we'll see you in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.